The Imperial scout ship Eternal Dawn floated silently at the edge of the solar system. Its sleek, silver hull reflected the distant sunlight as its advanced sensors studied the third planet from the sun. Inside the ship's main bridge, Captain Dae-ho Kim watched the holographic displays with growing interest. His weathered face showed the experience of many years exploring the galaxy for the Empire, but something about this new world made him feel strangely uncomfortable. The bridge buzzed with quiet activity as crew members worked at their stations. Screens and holographic displays filled the room with a soft blue glow, showing various readings and data streams from their scans of the planet below. Lieutenant Hannah Lee sat at her command station, her fingers moving quickly over the control panels as she monitored the incoming signals. "Captain, I'm detecting an unusual amount of transmissions from the planet," Hannah reported, her voice carrying a note of surprise. "They're using what appears to be primitive radio waves and digital signals, but the sheer volume is remarkable." Dae-ho walked closer to her station, his boots making soft sounds on the polished floor. He leaned over to look at her screen, his eyes narrowing as he studied the data. The planet below them, which the natives called Earth, seemed ordinary enough at first glance. It was a beautiful blue-green sphere wrapped in white clouds, looking peaceful and serene from space. "Show me what you're receiving," he ordered, straightening up and returning to his command chair. Hannah nodded and transferred the data to the main viewing screen. Immediately, the bridge was filled with a cascade of images and sounds from Earth. Most of it was what they expected from a developing civilization: entertainment broadcasts, news reports, and various forms of communication. But something else caught Dae-ho's attention, making him lean forward in his chair. "Stop. Go back to that last sequence," he commanded, his voice sharp with sudden interest. The screen showed images that made several crew members gasp quietly. They saw cities engulfed in massive explosions, military vehicles moving across battlefields, and weapons that seemed far more advanced than they had expected from such a young civilization. The humans appeared to have an unusual talent for warfare, and their weapons, while primitive by Imperial standards, showed remarkable ingenuity. "Begin the standard protocol for integration assessment," Dae-ho ordered, but his hand hesitated over the ship's log terminal. He couldn't shake off the feeling that there was something different about this planet. The Empire had absorbed hundreds of civilizations before, but none had given him this sense of unease. Down in the analysis chamber, several decks below the bridge, young analyst Jin-Woo Park was having his own disturbing revelation. The room was smaller than the bridge, filled with computers and data terminals. Jin-Woo sat surrounded by holographic displays, showing Earth's historical records, his face illuminated by the glow of multiple screens. As he dug deeper into Earth's history, his eyes grew wider with each new discovery. He found records of global conflicts, of weapons that could destroy entire cities, of warfare that spanned continents. But what truly frightened him wasn't just the destruction. It was how quickly humans had advanced. In just a few centuries, they had gone from fighting with primitive weapons to developing nuclear bombs. "This can't be right," Jin-Woo muttered to himself, double-checking his findings. He pulled up more data, comparing dates and technological developments. The pattern was clear and deeply troubling. These humans didn't just fight wars, they learned from them. Each conflict pushed their technology forward at an incredible pace. They took ideas from their enemies and improved upon them. They adapted, evolved, and became stronger with each challenge they faced. As Jin-Woo compiled his report, his hands trembled slightly over the controls. He knew what he had to tell his superiors, but he also knew they might not want to hear it. The Empire had never encountered a species quite like this before. These humans weren't just another civilization to be peacefully absorbed into the Empire. They were potentially dangerous. The young analyst looked up at the ceiling, knowing that somewhere above him, Captain Dae-ho was probably reaching similar conclusions. The standard protocol for integration might not work with Earth. In fact, trying to force these humans to join the Empire could be a terrible mistake. Jin-Woo began preparing his report, carefully documenting everything he had found. He included the rapid technological advancement, the humans' remarkable ability to adapt and improve their weapons, and their apparent willingness to fight against overwhelming odds. As he worked, he couldn't help but wonder if the Empire was about to make its first major mistake in centuries of expansion. High above him, Captain Deho continued to watch the transmissions from Earth, his unease growing stronger with each passing moment. Perhaps this time, the Empire would need to think very carefully about its next steps. This small blue planet might just be more than they bargained for. The grand chamber of the Imperial Palace on Nexus Prime was a sight that still took Jin Wu's breath away. Towering crystal columns stretched up into darkness, their surfaces catching and reflecting the soft purple light that filled the room. The Imperial Council members sat in elevated seats arranged in a semicircle, their ornate robes and decorated uniforms marking their high status. Jin Wu stood at the center of the chamber, feeling very small beneath their scrutinizing gazes. His simple analyst's uniform seemed plain compared to their grandeur, but he squared his shoulders and took a deep breath. The information he carried was too important for him to let nervousness stop him. "Distinguished members of the Imperial Council," he began, proud that his voice remained steady despite the churning in his stomach. He activated his presentation device, and immediately the air above him filled with holographic images. The councilors' faces were bathed in the harsh light of explosions and warfare as Earth's history played out before them. "What you're seeing is the military history of the species we've discovered," Jin Wu explained, gesturing to the images. "These are their world wars, conflicts that engulfed their entire planet." He paused as scenes of trenches, tanks, and aerial bombardments played out. But what's truly remarkable is the speed of their development. The images shifted, showing the progression from muskets to machine guns, from primitive aircraft to supersonic jets, from simple bombs to nuclear weapons. In less than 2 centuries, they went from using basic gunpowder weapons to developing nuclear capabilities. The rate of advancement is unlike anything we've seen before. Councillor Myra Song leaned forward in her seat, her silver-threaded robes rustling with the movement. Her face, though aged, still carried the sharp intelligence that had made her famous in imperial politics. "Many species advance quickly once they discover basic principles," she said dismissively, waving her hand. "We've seen this pattern before." Jin Wu felt a flash of frustration, but he kept his voice respectful. "With all due respect, Counselor, that's not what concerns me most." He pressed a control, and new images appeared. "Please observe their pattern of adaptation." The display showed various conflicts throughout Earth's history. When faced with superior forces, humans don't just fight. They learn. They modify their tactics, improve their weapons, and find ways to overcome seemingly impossible odds. He highlighted specific examples: guerrilla warfare against larger armies, resistance movements against occupying forces, smaller nations successfully defending against larger ones. They're remarkably good at turning their enemies' strengths against them. They study their opponents, adapt their strategies, and often end up using modified versions of their adversaries' own weapons. The council chamber grew quieter as Jin Wu continued. "But perhaps most concerning is this concept they've developed." He brought up diagrams of nuclear weapons and their effects. "They call it mutually assured destruction. Even when they developed weapons capable of destroying their entire civilization, they didn't destroy themselves. Instead, they created a balance of power based on the threat of total annihilation." The chamber erupted in murmurs at this revelation. Several councillors leaned forward, their expressions showing varying degrees of concern and disbelief. Jin Wu pressed his advantage while he had their attention. "This species has maintained an uneasy peace, not through cooperation or mutual understanding, but through the knowledge that any major conflict could result in their extinction. And somehow, this has worked for them for nearly a century." High Admiral Ta Jung Kang, his uniform gleaming with medals, spoke up. "Are you suggesting this primitive species could pose a threat to the Empire?" His tone suggested he found the very idea ridiculous. Jinmu chose his next words carefully. I'm suggesting that this species responds to threats in ways we haven't seen before. They're unpredictable, adaptive, and have shown a remarkable ability to advance their technology when under pressure. He brought up one final set of images, Earth's current military capabilities. They maintain massive standing armies even in peacetime. They continue to develop new weapons even without any external threats. And most importantly, they've somehow turned their internal divisions into a complex system of checks and balances that prevents any one power from becoming too dominant. The chamber had grown very quiet now. Even Counselor Myray was watching the displays with increased interest. Jinwu took another deep breath before delivering his final point. If we proceed with standard integration protocols, we need to be prepared for the possibility that this species might not respond like others we've encountered. Their entire history suggests they will resist, and based on their pattern of adaptation, they might become more dangerous the more pressure we apply. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Jinwu stood steady, watching as the council members exchanged glances and whispered among themselves. He had done what he could to warn them. Now it was up to them to decide whether to heed those warnings. The United Earth Defense Command Center hummed with tension. Located deep underground in a classified location, the massive room was filled with advanced monitoring equipment and giant display screens covering every wall. The air was cool and dry, heavy with the weight of what they all knew was coming. General Yang Cho stood at the central command station, his eyes fixed on the main display. The screen showed multiple red dots appearing at the edge of the solar system. The alien ships they had been waiting for. Around him, representatives from every major nation on Earth watched in silence. Some wore military uniforms, others formal civilian attire, but all shared the same focused expression. "They're here," Yang He announced, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of equipment. He didn't need to say more. Everyone in the room knew what those dots meant. They had been preparing for this moment ever since their deep space monitoring stations had first detected the approaching fleet 3 months ago. President Su Jin-Kang moved forward from where she had been standing with other world leaders. Her steps were confident, her expression determined. As the elected spokesperson for Earth's unified response, she carried the weight of humanity's future on her shoulders. "Then it's time," she said firmly. "Send the message." The technical team sprang into action. They had rehearsed this countless times, but now it was real. Fingers flew across keyboards as they initiated the transmission sequence they had prepared. The message they were about to send was the result of months of careful planning, debate, and collaboration between Earth's nations. On one of the larger screens, the message began to play as it was being transmitted. It started with images of Earth's earliest civilizations, the pyramids, the Great Wall, ancient cities rising from deserts and jungles. Then came the Industrial Revolution, showing humanity's rapid advancement from steam engines to electricity, from horse-drawn carriages to automobiles and aircraft. But they didn't just show their achievements. The message included footage of their wars, tanks rolling across battlefields, cities reduced to rubble, the devastating power of nuclear weapons. It showed humanity's capacity for destruction, but also their ability to rebuild from the ashes. The images shifted to show how former enemies had become allies, how nations that once fought bitter wars now work together in space, in science, in trade. It demonstrated humanity's resilience, their ability to learn from their mistakes and grow stronger. "The message is being broadcast on all frequencies we can access," reported one of the technicians. "We're using every format and encoding method we've developed, including the ones based on universal mathematical principles." The final part of the transmission began to play. It was their warning, carefully crafted to be both clear and unmistakable. "We know you're watching. We know what you represent. Earth is not your next conquest. We will not be absorbed or subjugated. This is not a negotiation. It's a warning. Stay away." The room fell silent as the message continued to transmit. They had debated the wording for weeks. Some had argued for a more diplomatic approach, others for an even stronger warning. In the end, they had chosen directness. There would be no misunderstanding their intent. "Message is repeating on all channels," another technician confirmed. "We're getting strong signal confirmation." President Su Jin nodded slowly. "Now we wait to see how they respond." General Yamha's eyes remained fixed on the display showing the alien ships. They're still maintaining their position at the edge of the system. No movement yet. Around the room, the representatives of Earth's nations watched and waited. They had united in a way that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. The threat from beyond their world had done what centuries of diplomacy couldn't. It had given them a common purpose. "All military forces remain at high alert," Yonghe reported. "Space defense systems are active and tracking. Ground-based defenses are ready." They had prepared as best they could, knowing they faced a technologically superior force. But humanity had faced seemingly impossible odds before. They had spent decades preparing for this possibility, developing weapons and strategies specifically designed to counter advanced alien technology. President Su Jin moved to stand beside General Yonghe. "They'd probably think we're just another primitive species they can easily absorb into their empire," she said quietly. The general allowed himself a small smile. "Then they're in for a surprise. We may be younger than them, we may not have their technology, but we've spent our entire history learning how to face stronger opponents." A message continued to broadcast into space, carrying humanity's warning to the waiting alien fleet. Earth's first official communication with an alien civilization wasn't a greeting of peace or a request for friendship. It was a warning to stay away. It was humanity saying, in no uncertain terms, that they would not submit quietly to conquest. Now they would see if the aliens were wise enough to listen. The Imperial Council chamber shook with Admiral Taiwan Park's rage as his fist crashed down on the polished black table. His face had turned red with anger, and several of his medals clinked together as he leaned forward. The other council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unused to such displays of emotion in these hallowed chambers. "This is outrageous." Taiwan's voice echoed off the crystal walls. "How dare they? How dare a primitive species threaten the mighty Galactic Empire?" He turned to glare at the holographic display still showing Earth's message, his jaw clenched tight. Jin Wu stood before them, fighting to keep his composure. Despite the Admiral's outburst, he knew he had to make them understand. Too much was at stake. He took a deep breath and spoke in a clear, steady voice. "Sir, please, I urge you to look at the data again." He brought up new displays, showing Earth's military installations and defense systems. They've been preparing for this moment for decades. Look at these facilities. They've developed countermeasures for technologies they haven't even encountered yet. The young analyst moved through his presentation quickly, highlighting key points. Their entire military doctrine is based on facing superior forces. They don't just plan for enemies they know about. They plan for every possible threat they can imagine. Theoretical defense systems against energy weapons they've never seen. Strategies for fighting faster than light ships when they can barely reach their own moon. They've even developed weapons specifically designed to work against advanced shielding technology. Jin Wu's voice grew more urgent as he continued. Admiral Taiwan's face grew darker with each word. He stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Enough," he barked, making several council members jump. "I've heard enough of this nonsense. These humans are barely out of their stone age compared to us. Their primitive weapons and imaginary defenses mean nothing against imperial power." He turned to his subordinates. "Prepare the fleet. We'll show them what real power looks like. Let's see how their theoretical defenses hold up against actual imperial technology." The admiral stormed out of the chamber, his boots echoing on the polished floor. Several other military leaders followed him, already beginning to discuss invasion plans. Jin Wu watched them go, his heart sinking. In her private chambers later that day, Counselor Myre sat alone, reviewing Jinwoo's reports for the third time. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of holographic displays showing data about Earth. Something about these humans troubled her deeply. She studied their history again, noting patterns that others had missed. These humans had a habit of seeming weak until pushed into a corner. Then they would reveal hidden strengths, new weapons, unexpected strategies. They didn't just fight. They evolved through conflict. Mai Ray brought up their entertainment media, their books, movies, and games. So many of them focused on scenarios where humanity faced overwhelming odds against superior forces. And in these stories, humans almost always found a way to win. It wasn't just entertainment, it was preparation. They had been mentally preparing their entire species for this kind of confrontation. She thought about Admiral Ta Won's reaction and shook her head slowly. His pride would not let him see the danger. The Empire had grown too used to easy victories, too accustomed to other species submitting without real resistance. A soft chime announced a visitor. "Enter," Mai Ray called out. Jinwoo stepped into the chamber, looking tired but determined. "Counselor, I apologize for disturbing you, but I had to speak with you privately." Mai Ray gestured for him to sit. "You're worried about Admiral Ta Won's decision." "Yes," Jinwoo admitted. "He's underestimating them. They're not like other species we've encountered. They don't think like us." Mai Ray nodded slowly. "I've been studying your reports. Tell me, what do you think will happen if we attack?" Jinwoo's face grew grave. "They'll lose the first battles, maybe even several campaigns. But they'll study us, learn from each defeat. They'll adapt our technology, find our weaknesses, and they'll never stop fighting." He paused. "The Empire has never faced a prolonged resistance. We've never needed to. But these humans, they've built their entire civilization around the concept of resistance against superior forces." Mai Ray turned to look out her window at the imperial capital sprawling below. The Empire had stood undefeated for thousands of years. But as she studied the human data again, she couldn't shake the feeling that they might be about to make a terrible mistake. The sound of distant ships taking off drew their attention. Through the window, they could see Imperial warships rising into the purple sky. The first wave of what would become an invasion fleet. "They're really going to do it," Jinwoo said quietly. "They're going to attack." Mai Ray's expression was troubled. "Yes, and I fear we're about to learn exactly why these humans warned us to stay away." The Imperial probe glided silently through space, its sleek silver surface reflecting the distant sunlight. Inside the Imperial Command Center, dozens of officers watched its progress on the main display screen. Admiral Ta Won stood with his hands clasped behind his back, a small smile of satisfaction on his face. "Let's see how these primitives handle a simple probe," he said, his voice filled with confidence. "Something to test their so-called defenses." The probe crossed the outer edges of Earth's solar system, its advanced stealth systems making it nearly invisible to conventional detection methods. Or so they thought. The response came with shocking speed. Dozens of signals lit up the Imperial command screens. Earth's defense systems had not only detected the probe, but were tracking it with remarkable precision. Old-fashioned radar installations combined their data with quantum sensors, creating a detection net that caught the probe despite its stealth technology. Jun-Ho Lee leaned forward at his monitoring station, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Sir, they're using some kind of hybrid detection system. It's like nothing we've seen before." Before anyone could respond, Earth's defense systems sprang into action. But instead of the primitive missiles they had expected, the humans launched a coordinated attack that left the Imperial officers stunned. They had combined their old radar technology with advanced quantum computing systems, allowing them to predict the probe's path with impossible accuracy. A series of small, fast-moving objects appeared on the screens. They weren't traditional missiles at all, but rather a swarm of networked interceptors. Each one was relatively simple on its own, but together they formed a complex web of destruction. "What are those?" Admiral Ta Won demanded, his earlier confidence wavering. Jinwoo, who had been quietly observing from the back of the room, stepped forward. They're combining multiple technologies, sir. Simple kinetic weapons guided by advanced AI systems. They're using old technology in ways we never considered. The probe tried to evade, its advanced systems attempting to confuse the incoming interceptors. But the humans had anticipated this. Their defensive network adapted instantly, the swarm of interceptors adjusting their approach with precision that shouldn't have been possible at their technological level. The probe never reached its target. The swarm surrounded it, and in a brief flash of light, the expensive Imperial probe became nothing more than scattered debris in space. Silence fell over the Imperial Command Center. Junho stared at his screens in shock, his whispered words barely audible. How did they? They combined technologies, Jinwoo explained, moving to stand beside him. Old and new. They're not fighting the way we expect them to fight. Look at these readings. They're using basic projectile weapons, but they're guiding them with quantum computers. They've taken simple concepts and applied advanced mathematics to make them devastatingly effective. Admiral Tawan's face had turned a deep shade of red. This is impossible. They shouldn't have this capability. Their technology level is exactly what makes them dangerous. Jinwoo interrupted, bringing up detailed analysis on the main screen. They don't think like we do. While we focus on developing new technologies, they find ways to combine and improve what they already have. They take simple, proven concepts and enhance them in ways we never considered. The display showed how Earth's defense system worked. Ancient radar installations had been upgraded with quantum sensors. Simple kinetic weapons were guided by advanced artificial intelligence. They had even found ways to use the limitations of their technology to their advantage, creating unpredictable patterns that confused more advanced systems. This was just a warning shot, Jinwoo continued. They've shown us they can detect and destroy our stealth technology, but I suspect they're holding back their more advanced capabilities. Junho nodded slowly, still studying the data. These readings suggest they have other defense systems we haven't seen yet. They only used what they needed to destroy the probe. They're being careful not to reveal too much. Admiral Tawan paced the command center, his earlier bravado replaced by growing concern. The humans had just demonstrated they were far more capable than anyone had expected. Their warning message didn't seem quite so primitive anymore. In orbit around Earth, the debris of the Imperial probe continued to drift, a clear message to the watching Empire. This was not going to be the simple conquest they had imagined. These humans had spent generations preparing for this moment, and they had just proven they were ready. The command center remained unusually quiet as officers studied the data from the failed probe mission. They had expected to demonstrate their power. Instead, they had learned a harsh lesson about underestimating their opponents. The humans had shown they could fight in ways the Empire had never seen before, and this was likely just the beginning. The Imperial Palace's grand throne room echoed with heated arguments. Council members shouted across the chamber, their voices bouncing off the crystal walls. The failed probe mission had divided the Empire's leadership like nothing before in their long history. Emperor Sungmin sat silently on his crystalline throne, watching the chaos unfold before him. His ancient eyes took in the scene as his advisors argued, their faces red with emotion. Thousands of years of tradition and unquestioned expansion had suddenly hit an unexpected obstacle. A young species that refused to submit. Councillor Myray stood calmly before the throne, her dignified presence a stark contrast to the disorder around her. In her hands, she held Jinwoo's detailed reports about Earth and its inhabitants. Her voice, when she spoke, cut through the noise like a blade. "Your Majesty," she said, her tone respectful but firm. "We face a choice unlike any in our history." The Emperor raised his hand, and silence fell immediately over the chamber. He nodded for Myray to continue. "We can proceed with our traditional approach, launch a full invasion, engage in what will surely be a costly and destructive war with an unprecedented species." She paused, letting her words sink in. Or we can do something the Empire has never done before. We can listen to a warning. Admiral Ta-1 stepped forward, his face still flushed with anger from the probe incident. Listen to primitives. Accept their defiance. The Empire has never backed down, and perhaps that is precisely why we should consider it now. May Ray countered. She activated a holographic display, showing footage from Earth's defense of their system. These humans destroyed our most advanced probe with technology that shouldn't have worked. They combined simple tools with complex mathematics in ways we never imagined possible. The display shifted to show more of Earth's preparations. Hidden bases, distributed defense systems, weapons designed specifically to counter advanced technology. They've been preparing for this moment for generations. Every piece of entertainment they create, every war they fight, every technology they develop, it's all been building toward defending against a superior force. In orbit around Earth, the Imperial fleet maintained its position, a dozen massive warships holding steady at the edge of the solar system. Their sensors continued to monitor the planet below, watching as humans broadcast their warning message again and again. Now, though, the message came with proof. Detailed data about how they had detected and destroyed the probe, demonstrations of other defense capabilities they possessed. Back in the throne room, Jin Wu had joined Mai Ray before the Emperor. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice steadied despite his nervousness. "These humans think differently than any species we've encountered. They don't seek to match our technology. They find ways to turn it against us. They don't try to fight us on our terms. They change the rules of engagement." The Emperor leaned forward slightly, his ancient eyes focusing on the young analyst. "You believe they could resist us successfully. I believe they would never stop fighting," Jin Wu replied. "Even if we won every battle, occupied their cities, controlled their planet, they would continue to resist, and with each defeat, they would learn, adapt, and grow stronger. They've done it throughout their entire history." Mai Ray nodded in agreement. The cost of victory, if we could achieve it at all, would be unprecedented, and we would have to maintain that occupation against a species that excels at resistance and adaptation. The Emperor sat back, his expression thoughtful. Thousands of years of imperial tradition weighed against this new threat. The Empire had never backed down, never accepted defiance from a younger species. But they had also never encountered a species quite like this before. In the silence that followed, the holographic displays showed more of Earth's preparations. They had transformed their entire moon into a defensive platform. Their orbital stations contained weapons designed to work in ways Imperial shields hadn't been designed to stop. And these were just the capabilities they were willing to show. "If we attack," Jin Wu added quietly, "we risk more than just a costly war. We risk showing the galaxy that the Empire can be fought, that our technology can be countered, that our power isn't absolute." The Emperor's eyes narrowed slightly at these words. Throughout the vast chamber, council members held their breath, waiting for his response. The next words he spoke would determine not just the fate of Earth, but potentially the future of the Empire itself. The choice they faced was unprecedented: continue with tradition and face a war unlike any they'd fought before, or take a new path and accept that some worlds were better left alone. In orbit above Earth, the Imperial fleet waited for orders, while below them, humanity stood ready to defend their home, no matter the cost. The Imperial shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, its silver hull gleaming in the morning sunlight. Behind it, 2 escort vessels followed at a respectful distance. All 3 ships flew with their weapon systems visibly powered down, their shields minimal, a deliberate show of peaceful intentions. Below them, New Zealand's specially constructed landing facility waited. The location had been chosen carefully, a neutral site in a peaceful nation, surrounded by natural beauty. But the display of Earth's military might was impossible to miss. Forces from every major nation stood in formation around the landing zone, their weapons and vehicles showcasing humanity's unified strength. Inside the shuttle, Counselor Myray watched the approach through a viewing screen. As the Empire's newly appointed chief diplomat, she carried the weight of this historic moment on her shoulders. It would be the first time in Imperial history that they would negotiate with a species as equals rather than simply absorbing them into the Empire. The landing was smooth and precise. As the shuttle's engines powered down, Myray took a deep breath, straightening her formal diplomatic robes. Around her, Imperial guards stood at attention, their ceremonial armor gleaming. Among them, Jinwu tried to maintain a professional expression, though his eyes sparkled with barely contained excitement. The shuttle's door opened with a soft hiss, revealing Earth's crisp morning air. Myray stepped out first, her feet touching Earth's soil in a moment that would be remembered throughout the galaxy. Before her stood President Su Jin-Kang, flanked by leaders from nations around the world. Their faces were composed but watchful. "Welcome to Earth," Su Jin said simply, her voice carrying clearly across the landing zone. "We trust our message was received." Myray allowed herself a small smile. "Indeed it was, Madam President. Your species has taught the Empire something we had forgotten. Sometimes the greatest power lies in knowing when not to fight." Around them, Earth's military display was impressive not just in its size, but in its diversity. Advanced stealth fighters shared the field with seemingly primitive, but heavily modified vehicles. Soldiers carried weapons that combined old and new technologies in ways that still surprised the Imperial observers. The two leaders walked together toward the treaty facility, their entourages following behind. Jinwu found himself walking near a group of Earth military officers, listening as they casually discussed their defensive capabilities. Their confidence wasn't just bravado. They had earned it. Inside the facility, the historic meeting began. The treaty they would sign was unprecedented in Imperial history. Earth would remain fully independent, maintaining its own military and government. The Empire would recognize Earth's sovereignty over its entire solar system. As the discussions progressed, Myray noticed something interesting. The humans weren't just negotiating to protect themselves. They were already thinking about future relations. They proposed trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and scientific collaboration. Even facing a vastly more advanced civilization, they were looking for opportunities to learn and grow. "Your species is remarkable," Myray commented during a brief break. "Most worlds we encounter either try to fight us completely or submit entirely. You found a third path." President Su Jin studied her counterpart carefully. "We've had a lot of practice finding alternative solutions. When you can't match your opponent's strength directly, you learn to think creatively." The treaty signing itself was broadcast across Earth and throughout the Empire. Billions watched as the document was signed. The first time in Imperial history that they had formally recognized a younger species as equals rather than subjects. Jinwu, standing with the other observers, couldn't help but smile. Everything he had predicted about humanity had proven true. They were different from any species the Empire had encountered before, and that difference had forced the Empire to change its own ancient ways. As the ceremony concluded, Earth's military forces performed a farewell display. Fighter jets streaked overhead, while ground forces demonstrated their hybrid weapon systems. It was both a show of respect and a subtle reminder of why this treaty was being signed in the first place. The Imperial delegation prepared to depart, but not before arrangements were made for ongoing diplomatic relations. Earth would send representatives to the Imperial capital, and the Empire would maintain an embassy on Earth. It was the beginning of a new kind of relationship for both civilizations. As the Imperial shuttle lifted off, Myray watched Earth grow smaller below them. The planet looked peaceful from space, its blue-green surface wrapped in white clouds. But she knew better now. This beautiful world had changed the Empire forever, proving that size and advancement weren't everything. Sometimes the will to resist, combined with creativity and determination, was power enough. Jinwu stood at a viewing port, watching his homeworld fade into the distance. Humanity had proven him right. They were indeed different, and that difference was exactly what the galaxy needed. As their ships headed back to Imperial space, he knew that both civilizations would never be quite the same again. Earth had gained its independence, and the Empire had gained something perhaps even more valuable, a new perspective on power and progress.